I'm here with Dee Daniels, affectionately known as Dr. D. She lives in Vancouver, and we had the pleasure of her headlining the Canada Black Music Archives Black History Month showcase at the MOV, the Museum of Vancouver, on February 27th of this year. Dr. D, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. It's a pleasure.
I want to share with some folks. I wish I could play the video, but they'll have to take my word for it now. We'll get to the video later. But to say that you brought the house down with your performance is really an understatement. Or shall we say, they were all on their feet every song that you performed. Is that typical of your performances, or did we get something special that evening?
Uh-oh. Is that one of those loaded questions?
It's not loaded, but I just got the impression that it was, I don't know if this is a usual thing in terms of your performances, but you really had people moved with your performance.
Well, I appreciate that. And if I might be candid, my goal is for that to happen every time. And I have a good record so far. Because for me, Phil, it's all about being honest, being aware, and connecting, from the inside out. That's all I'm there to do. And I actually have a little mantra that I have before I perform, or actually teach for that matter as well. And that is, I gladly, willingly, lovingly, gratefully, joyfully give myself to be used by Source to touch everybody within the sound of my voice in ways that only Source knows they need to be touched in that moment. That's all I'm there for.
Very well said. And that really was what took place that evening. Now, I want to take you back to the early years. We can talk about all the awards and all the great performances that you've, treated audiences with. You grew up in California. Take us back to the early years. You were singing in church. That's where it started, right?
Well, yes, So, yes, I grew. We used to kid around and say, if we were almost born literally in church, we were there so frequently, right? And I grew up in church, and by the time I was 9 years old, I was playing piano for the Sunday school, and also at the age of 9, I sang my first solo with the little Sunshine Kids choir, right? And that song it was an old hymn called Higher Ground. Mm-hmm. And that particular Sunday morning is when I felt an overwhelming warmth, and I felt like that was God speaking to me, and I ended up joining the church that Sunday. And from then, when I was about 11 years, almost 11 years old, my mom remarried, and my stepfather was a Baptist minister and had a church there in Oakland, California. And he had just recently formed this church, and my a friend of my mom's was a member there and said, well, this church is closer to the one that you've been going to, so why don't you come and take a look? Well, that was it. We got there, ended up joining the church. My mom was a choir director. I got hired to be the pianist at 11 years old and got paid $2 a week. I was rich, right? And that was the beginning of my music from that point of view, right?
So you really had no choice.
No, I had no choice, but at the same time, it was just something I could do and was supposed to do. And it wasn't until I was around 13, when you're your junior high school friends are going to movies on Sundays and you can't because you're in church, that I said, maybe this is not so much fun. But actually, it was. That period lasted a very, very short time. And, it was always something that I truly enjoyed. I don't even know how to describe it, but it went from something that I was supposed to do and had to do to something I really, really enjoyed doing, and of course, later on, as I got into music professionally, I was just feel like the whole thing was a blessing to have that kind of foundation.
Was there any sort of struggles is one thing that comes to mind, because the church has always provided the secular music world with some incredible artists, you being one of them. But what was that transition like for you?
Well, it was actually very difficult because even though I was in music in the church, my passion at the time, growing up actually through university, was art. So my degree is actually in art, not music. And but when it came to the point where actually I graduated from university, ended up teaching art in a Seattle high school, because we moved to Seattle right after I graduated from high school. And I ended up going to the University of Montana, where I got my degree, came back and ended up teaching at one of the high schools there in Seattle. And the interesting thing is, when I was attending the University of Montana, my junior and senior years, I actually joined a band, and we were doing rock and roll and R&B of the day, right? And there was a Seattle-based band that used to come to Missoula, Montana, and they'd play in one of the taverns there. And I used to sit in with them because they found out I could sing, right? And I was singing with the band, so on my off nights or whatever, I'd sit in with them. And then just as I had gotten my teaching position, I didn't begin teaching until the second semester, which was January. So the New Year's Eve prior to that, I went to a house party in Seattle. It was in this huge mansion. They had a live band, but there were so many rooms. I knew so many people that I never actually got into the room where the band was. And it wasn't until the evening was over and the band was loading out that I bumped into the guitar player at the door. And he stopped me, tapped me on the shoulder, says, do you know a woman by the name of Dee Daniels? And I looked at her and said, intimately. Yes, I do. So we got to talking, and it turns out, to make a long story short, that I started my teaching position in a few days after then, and maybe 4 or 5 weeks after that, they contacted me and asked if I would do some background vocals for an album that they were going to be recording. So I did. And when we finished that project, actually, I ended up co-writing some of the songs on that album and doing some lead vocals on that album. And when they completed the project, they asked me if I would consider joining the band. Wow. And I said, absolutely not. I have a real job. Oh, yeah. I mean, I had a real job. I knew I was getting paid every 2 weeks, right?
Right.
And my experience in university, I said, okay, this is a rock and roll group here. I know what they do, and I'm not interested in none of that, So I said no, but they kept after me until I agreed to work on the weekends, because I'm teaching 5 days a week, right?
Of course.
Well, okay, I did that about 6 weeks and fell in love with just music, entertaining. So now I'm working 5 days a week and working 6 nights a week, because it was and this is week after week after week after week. This was the heyday in the Seattle area. And I did that for almost a year before my body said to me, you got to make a decision here. Otherwise, I'm gonna hook you up in a way you don't want to be hooked up here. You know,
You were burning out.
the candle was burning at both ends, right? So
Yes.
I after I think the hardest decision for me to make was to resign from teaching and join that band, because I still had my church stuff, in my head, and you know, to sing secular music was kind of like the devil's music, you
Hmm.
know, and it just tore me apart to the point where I actually made myself physically ill.
Oh
Just
boy.
that stress, that anxiety, the decision. But I finally went to my parents, and my stepfather says, "Well, Dee, you can't serve two masters, so you just need to choose one, and whichever way you go, we support you." Because
Amen to that.
yeah, so they knew my heart. They knew I wasn't going to get out there and lose my mind.
Yes.
So in the middle of the school year, I decided to give my hand in my resignation, and so my first official day of being a professional musician was March 17th, and I never looked back. I've been totally blessed that I never had to have a day job or any other kind of job. I've only had music my entire career, so I am totally blessed for that.
And can I say this? It seems to me that um, some of the songs that you sang
Mhm.
early this year at our event for the CBMA had a tinge of gospel to
Oh yeah, I didn't give it up. I
it.
just
So,
expanded.
yes. The first thing that comes to mind is This Little Light of Mine.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's a standard in the gospel world, old school, right?
Exactly.
I don't know if the babies know anything about that song in particular, but and I was thinking, for that particular program, of course, it's Black History, and I had to go there. you
Well,
know.
I think what was amazing about that is folks knew that song. And again, for the benefit of people who weren't there to witness it, it was a pretty diverse audience that, said that a song like that had transcended a number of ethnic groups and people of different backgrounds, that sort of thing.
Yes, yes, yes. I find that that particular song, every time I've ever done that, no matter where I've been in the world, uh, people are familiar with that particular song.
Mm,
I mean, which blew my mind. I could be in Europe somewhere, because I mean, this has happened to me, right? When I've
yes.
been in Europe somewhere, and I for whatever reason I choose to pull that song out, and people start singing along, and I said, okay, okay, this is good.
It's a winner. So, reading your bio, Dr. D, I'm amazed at the variety of experiences, including living in Europe for a
Mhm.
number of years. So, take us from you, breaking out, working with that group, writing songs, and then at some point you decided, I need to go to Europe.
Mhm.
How do we go from that to Europe?
Well, that first band, the name of the group was Dee Daniels and Dynamite. They made that name up, not me. Um,
For the
and
record, right?
yeah, for the record, because they were called something else. They were a band existing before I joined them. But anyhow, I worked with them for a year, and then I realized that rock and roll was not my thing.
Okay.
Because I'm watching the guitar player break strings and restring during the set, and I said, man, if my vocal cords go, because I'm trying to sing over all of this sound up here, I'm done. So I said, okay,
Hmm.
that's it. So I resigned from that band, created my own band, and I was doing cover tunes, right? And uh, I I the news media. I mean, I worked all the time. That was my life. I just worked, and I just loved it, right? But when you're doing cover tunes, although you're expanding your repertoire, constantly, still, I, as a creative person, singing these songs, I never could really sing them as exactly like they were on the record, right? I always heard more, different. And so I just called it messing with the melody. But the newspaper started referring to me as a jazz singer, and I was highly perturbed about that. So what are they talking about? Because I didn't know anything about jazz except for the crooners I would hear on the radio sometimes. But anyway, so I went to a couple of the older jazz musicians there who became mentors of mine and said, what the heck? What are they talking about? And they said, Dee, you ought to take that as a compliment. After all, jazz is the an original art form.
Yes.
So
yes.
what you need to start doing now is listen, And they gave me a bunch of names, vocalists and instrumentalists to listen to, which I did. And I said, wow, okay, this is something I can get into, because in jazz, you're expected to improvise.
Of course.
In pop music, you're expected to sing it just like the record. So I said, wow, this is freedom. I am free, So I got into it. I got my first jazz gig there in Seattle, and it just grew and grew and grew. And finally, I had done I had done everything an entertainer could do in Seattle. I was at the Opera House a few times. I was on radio and television, and all of that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, I got to get out of here, because I'm the big fish in the little pond. And I don't want to, I don't want to burn out here doing something that is so limiting. So I knew I had to leave, but I didn't know where I wanted to go. The choices were LA. Well, I didn't want to do that because I didn't like the mentality of the music industry in LA at that time. That's just me. The second choice was to go to New York. I didn't want to go to New York because I had other musician friends that had gone to New York, and New York made them start all over again. Now, at this point in my career, I owned my own home. I had 2 cars, and I was living the life of Riley. So why would I want to give up
go to New York for that
and go to New York and start making $75 a gig?
Yes.
So that was not appealing to me. So the third choice was to go to Europe. I had so many of my older mentors, said, no, you just go to Europe. But then a really interesting thing happened, Phil.
What's that?
At that time, one of my fans was an internationally known artist, a painter by the name of Leroy Neiman. And Leroy was brought to Seattle. He lived in New York. He was brought to Seattle and to paint. It was a painting of the pitcher for the Seattle Mariners, Gaylord Perry, and it was, I don't know, to celebrate his 300th hit or something. I don't know what it was. Anyway, so the Seattle art dealer there, because he only had 33 exclusive art dealers with his art around the world, right? And one of them lived in Seattle, and we were friends, she and I. So, and that's how I met him initially. So anyway, she had a reception for him at her home and invited me. And The funny thing is, Leroy had never heard me sing live. He only had my tapes, recorded stuff, right?
Hmm.
And so she said, "You gotta sing. He has to hear you live, you know." And they had a pianist there just playing, background music. I said, "No, go, come on, you gotta sing." So I went and sang a song, and as soon as I released my very last note of the song, Leroy came up to me, grabbed me by the arm, took me over in the corner of the room, sat me down, and said, "What in the heck are you doing here in Seattle?" And I knew what he meant. And I just said, I knew what he meant. And then he told me the story of his career. He said, I was from Minneapolis, became the best known artist in Minneapolis, and then Minnesota. Then I moved to Chicago, became the best known artist in Chicago and Illinois. Then I moved to New York, and New York always referred to me as Chicago artist Leroy Neiman, now living in New York.
Oh boy.
And he said, I got sick and tired of that. So I left, and he said, I left and went to Paris. Well, Paris and the French embraced him, and then all of the rest of Europe. So he was there for a couple of years, then he went back to New York. And of course, New York, he was the New York artist, Leroy Neiman. And he said, you just got to get out. And he gave me a print of a famous sailboat that he had painted. And he said, take a boat to Europe. And just at that time, just circumstances, for me, I'll say for me personally, when I'm in that place of indecision, that is painful. It just kills me. But once you make the decision, it's like the windows of heaven open up and everything you need, you don't have to think about nothing. Things just fall into place. And that's exactly what happened. And I ended up just through these synchronicities, going to Europe. I ended up going to Holland because I didn't know where I was going to go. I was thinking maybe England because of the language. And this young man, an American guy from Washington State, he was a sax player. And we had been on stage together for a couple of organized jam sessions. It was an invitation-only thing. And we did those two shows, and he left and went to Europe. And I didn't see him for 4 years. And he just happened to come back with his Dutch girlfriend and looked me up, came to my house, and I told him, I'm going to Europe. He said, well, where are you going? I said, I'm thinking about going to England, because of the language. He says, well, why don't you come to Holland? Everybody speaks English. You can stay with my girlfriend until you find your own place. You can work with my band. I said,
The doors of heaven opened up.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I went over there, and I ended up actually living with Anna, and what's her name, for a year because they ended up breaking up. We were friends, and I was there I was only going for 3 months. I had so much work that I couldn't leave for 6 months. I could not leave because I had work. So I went back to Seattle, sold my home, sold my cars, sold everything, and moved back over there. And that was the beginning of me as a jazz singer, because that's where I was at that time.
Wow.
And it was amazing. I mean, there, because the living legends of jazz went to Europe at that time. Now I'm talking about the early mid 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were still the golden years over there for jazz artists. So our living legends of jazz would go do 10-day, 3-week tours all across Europe, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year, because that's where they made the money.
Right.
It wasn't sitting in New York and going to those places. They made big money over there, right? So many times the promoters wanted to have a singer. Well, that was me. So
Okay.
I get the call to go. You know, I've worked with so many legends. It's just crazy, 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 crazy. You know.
Let me ask you this, because again, you're noted for performing with a lot of legends.
Yeah.
Can you name a few that you enjoyed working with?
Oh, I enjoyed working with them all, but I'll name them. Um, I actually have my second album I ever recorded was with the Monty Alexander Trio. So that's Monty Alexander on piano, John Clayton on bass, and Jeff Hamilton on drums. Not only did I do that, I did concerts with those guys. I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with uh, I'll just say over there first, and then I'll get back to the States.
Mm-hmm.
But Sir Roland Hanna, Ed Thigpen, Jimmy Woody, Harry Sweets Edison, Red Holloway, Al Cohen, Al Gray, uh, uh, um, the brothers, Hank Jones, Elvin Jones. I was in a group with the both of them in the same band. Um, uh, Lionel
So,
Hampton, Herb Ellis.
so you had your pick of the litter, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I know it's a much longer list, but I'm not
Oh,
gonna
it's huge.
I'm not gonna test your memory because I was looking at this list and it just went on and on and on and on. Not a criticism, but just the idea that once you became a jazz singer
Mm-hmm.
and decided to move to Europe, I remember thinking John Coltrane performed in an R&B band in Philly. So it almost feels like it's a rite of passage for a
Yeah.
number of what people call rhythm and blues singers to being jazz singers. And a lot of times, some people reject that label
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it puts you in a box.
That's right. That's
Most
right.
people don't know what an incredible gospel singer you are, but that's how the system operates.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Um, I heard Nancy Wilson, who I loved, say one time in an interview that she always refused to be put in a box. She said
Right.
she referred to herself as a song stylist. You know that means you can take any song, any genre, and you sing it in your style. And to me, as a vocalist, that's a no-brainer. You know, but people, in and out of the industry need labels. They need
Yes.
tags,
Yes.
they need signs, and so forth. So, and when I heard her say that, I said, "Well, this is me." I mean, because my bottom line is, I love music that moves me. That touches me, that makes a difference in my life, that takes me on a journey. That's what I love, and I don't care what genre it's in. You know, if I in another life I would have been a classical singer because
Oh,
I love classical music, but I love gospel, I love blues. I actually, when I was growing up in Oakland, there was one radio station. I can almost remember the name of it, that depending on what day and what time of day, you could hear just about any kind of music, including country and western. You know, I enjoy a lot of country and western music because of it's really serious storytelling music.
right, right.
And so that for me was a struggle, being boxed up. You know.
So the next time we get to introduce you to an audience, perhaps here in Toronto, can we say song stylist?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. Now, let me jump over to the various philharmonics, orchestras, and things like that. That's a side of your career that actually caught me by surprise because, yes, we've heard, the albums that you've recorded, and they're all great. I find myself coming back to Toronto and saying to folks, have you heard of Dee Daniels? And then they go to listen online and, oh, okay, that's who it is. So orchestras, philharmonics, how did that come about?
Well, I don't know hardly any singers that would not love to sing with a symphony orchestra. I don't know many. So it is something that I always wanted to do, and I had the my first opportunity came in the 1990s when I was invited to do a 7-concert tour with the North Netherlands orchestra, symphony orchestra, and I was gone then because I left Europe in 1987. So I was here in Canada at that time. I had gotten married and was here, and for me that was like a dream come true. And actually, I got ahead of myself. 2 years before then, because I had the same thing. I would just love to sing with a symphony orchestra. I got a call from a record label in Germany that had a special kind of arrangement with the Metropole Orchestra of Holland. Now, the Metropole Orchestra of Holland is one of the most well-known and unique orchestras in the world. Their programs, they have guest artists from all kinds of music that are, they're legends, right? And so he asked me, would I like to record with the Metropole Orchestra? And if he could have seen what I was doing at home on the phone,
you were doing the happy dance.
I was doing that. Yeah, okay, yeah, Hercules. Okay, here we go. So anyway, I went over and we did that recording in 2 separate sessions. Right, they were a few months apart, and the conductor that they had at the time, his name was Rob Pronk, and Rob was an Indonesian Dutchman of incredible reputation throughout Europe and in the States. He said, what songs do you want to do? I gave him a list, and he made these incredible arrangements. And this was on the first session. And my friend and my brother, John Clayton, who is a world famous bass player that I actually met when I was living in Holland, because he was too. He married a Dutch woman. His children were born there. People should check him out, John Clayton. John had never orchestrated for an orchestra, but wanted to, So I told him about, the first half session that I had done. And I said, well, John, I'm going to see if they will let you write the arrangements for these tunes, Now, John, when he was living in Europe, everybody knew who he was. And he actually worked with the Amsterdam Philharmonic Orchestra, because he's both classical and jazz, right? His name was known, for sure. Yes. And Rob, being as generous as he is, they knew each other too. And he says, okay, yeah, he can write the arrangements, but I'll conduct the recording session, you know.
Nice,
So
nice.
John wrote these arrangements, and he actually flew himself over, you know, to be there and witness the that recording. And that was my first experience. And then a couple of years later, I was invited by the North Netherlands orchestra to do the 7 concert tour. And that's when I actually learned how to sing with a symphony orchestra, because it's not the same as singing with a trio or a small combo. And it took me, fortunately, one of the orchestra members was recording each concert, and I had a chance to listen, because I thought I was just singing the song, the melody, and I said, "Oh my God, I'm all over the place," you know. And I just tuned it, and by the 4th concert, I was comfortable in it. And I said, "Okay, this is it," because the arrangements are written based on the melody. So you can, you know, there's a fine line of being able to stay true to the melody, but improvise and be yourself within that. And that's what I had to learn, you know. So that led to, I mean, that was years ago. Once I got here into Canada and got established and, you know, had been here for a little while, I said, man, I would like to have, I got a call from Jeff Tyzik, who is Mr. Pop's conductor in the United States.
Yes.
He's conducted for, been the resident Pop's conductor for many, many orchestras, the big ones in the United States. And he was here in Vancouver. This was in the early 2000s. And the singer that was contracted to do this show, he had a swing show. Something happened, she got sick or couldn't make it or something. So I had already worked with the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra a few times, and they just called me and said, "Can you fill in?" And I happened to be able to do that. Well, he and I hit it off. I liked his arrangement. He liked what I did with his arrangement. So he said, "Well, would you consider joining me, you know, whenever I do any kind of swing program?" I said, "Yeah." So I did that for 2 years, you know, and just all over the place. Canada, I was with the Toronto Symphony, the
Yes.
National, yeah, and after 2 years, I said, "Man, this is me. You know, I love this." So I talked to Jeff about it, and him being the generous person that he is, I said, "Jeff, I want to create my own programs." He said, "Oh yeah, you should," you know. So I did that. I only had enough money to create a half program at first, because that's a whole other world, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as far as arrangements are concerned. But I did, and found an agent, because you can't book that yourself. You have to have a representative, and never looked back. And that's been, I don't know, almost 25 years.
And I'm gonna go out on a limb here in my break, but I'm suspecting that once you got into that whole world of symphonies and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't quite the same pull to record albums because you were always busy.
Yes. Yeah. And when you record albums, you're not doing it with an orchestra. So now you're back into combo land, you know, with a smaller group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but I managed to be somewhat consistent, you know, in maintaining that, because, you know, I wasn't doing symphony pops programs all the time, but most of the time, right? So I
Yes.
also I did festival things, you know, club dates or you know, special events and all of that kind of stuff with
Mm-hmm.
small groups, you know, and So I'm still going out, and meeting. What I did do is I stopped having my own band because when I'm a band leader, I feel responsible for keeping people working. And I said, this is too much.
We know how that works. Yes.
Oh yeah, So what that meant was either I'd put bands together because I knew musicians all over the country, or um, uh, I would the promoter would organize bands. Of course, I had say so as to who they were and all of that kind of stuff, right? Yes. And so it just freed me up to be more flexible, and also the kind of work that I wanted to do. It really freed me up to do, to be more versatile, and to diversify, which is something I did, and I'm so glad I did, because it just opened up my whole world. I didn't have to worry about this area drying up or that area over there, because I was able to do a lot of things. I could do all kinds of combo stuff. I could do vocal stuff. I could do orchestra stuff. I'm teaching, and so it's provided me with a joy-filled life, a comfortable life. And now I'm in my legacy years, my legacy mode here, and I realized that I need to document some things, and that's what I'm in the process of doing now.
Well, I should let our audience know that we've had a few phone conversations, and one of the things that I was encouraging you to do, because I'm here in Toronto, you're on the West Coast, and oftentimes the folks on the East Coast don't know about the artists on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And I always felt that to bridge that gap, someone with as incredible a history in the music business as you have, perhaps should write a book.
Funny you should say that. I am seriously. I just completed 2 teaching books. One is a student version, and then I have a teacher's companion book, because more than 2 decades ago, I developed a teaching framework called the Total Self Approach to Singing. And I've been teaching from that since. It continues to expand, but it's nobody else is nobody else is doing this the way I do it. There's a little overlap in a couple of teaching methods, but only 2 that I've found so far. But anyway, so I've completed that from the point of view that I've done my final edit, and now I have it out to a few people that I really respect in that area, just getting their comments. But while they're doing that, I am writing that book that you're talking about.